Okay, here's how to tell if you got a bad tie rod or suspension component. You can see this edge of the tread here is pretty well gone compared to this edge over here. Or real thin on that side. So the inner tie rod on this side of the car was bad, and it was causing that, and it's actually causing the tire to shimmy a little bit at speed. It kind of, you could feel it when it was mounted on the car. You could actually, when the car is lifted up off the ground, you can take the tire and you could feel that play in there. That's how I knew the tie rod was bad. And it was about 2 years ago I replaced the outer tie rods because they were loose. And so I checked it again, and the inner tie rods were bad this time. Okay, a little project. I got a 2008 Mustang GT, and what I'm doing today, we're changing the inner tie rods. About 2 years ago I changed the outer tie rods, and now the inners are getting loose. So here's the part. It comes with the bellows, everything you need to install it. I've got the Motorcraft replacement part, and this is the part number. This works on both sides, driver and passenger side. So first thing you're going to want to do is lift the car up off the ground, and I'll show you where to put the jack stand. See where I got the jack stand there, where the control arm goes into this little stub of frame, front subframe. That's a good spot to put the jack stand. Okay, here's some of the tools you're going to need to change that inner tie rod. You need a pair of locking pliers, 1/2-inch drive, ratchet, torque wrench, big hammer. I think it's about a 3-pound hammer. Some cotter pins. You'll need a side cutters, big crescent wrench, possibly pipe wrench, a little bit of grease. I got some PB blaster and some brake parts cleaner. And then when you're done, you can grease the ball joint and outer tie rod. You got a grease gun. Okay, I'm gonna turn the wheel so that everything's easier to get to. First thing you want to do, you can come down in here, get that old cotter pin out of there. Sometimes you can just keep pulling on that. Oh. There it goes. Get it out of there.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, next you're going to need an 18mm socket. I'm going to loosen that nut up. You may need to spray this with a little something, some PB blaster or something if it's really rusted on there bad. And just loosen that up. Just loosen it to the top of the nut, and then you take your big hammer. See how it dropped down now? It popped out of the socket. That way you can do it without damaging it. Okay, next you're going to want to loosen this jam nut. You might want to have pliers or something holding the inner tie rod. Just want to break that loose. Jam nut. And it's broke loose enough there. Okay, you may need a little lubricant, some PB blaster or something on these threads here. as you're gonna do is, next thing we're gonna take this nut off the rest of the way, and then I'm gonna unscrew the outer tie rod from the inner tie rod. Okay, so once you got your jam nut loose, you want to take your tie rod and turn it off the inner tie rod and just count how many rotations, and just remember that for when you install the old tie rod onto the new. Okay, next you're going to want to take this jam nut off of there, which this one's seized down there real bad, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the impact wrench, and I got locking pliers here holding the inner tie rod. Okay, after you got that nut off, next thing I want to do is take off this clamp off of the boot, and there's another clamp back here that you'll have to cut off with the side cutters or anything you can do. You can take a screwdriver and just break them off. Okay, I got that little clamp. Stop. Okay, I just took the wire cutters and broke this little clamp off the inside. Then you take your boot off. It's stuck here. There's a little groove in the tie rod. Just gonna pull it. There it goes. And then next, what we're going to do is we're going to put a pipe wrench right on here. It's got a, let's see, I need the light. Right here. Slide that little ring back in if you have that. And then you're going to put your pipe wrench right on here on this hex part. Okay, so I got the pipe wrench on there. I'm just going to try to lay down here and knock that loose. I have to move this light. Can you hold the light? There, broke loose. And all you got to do is unthread this from the steering rack. There you go. So here's the old one. You can see it's just very loose. And when it was on the car, you could actually take the wheel and kind of pull on it a little bit, and there was a little slop in the joint. It's kind of hard to do when it's off the car, but look how sloppy that joint is versus this one. I can't even move this one by hand, you know, with all my strength. That's how tight that joint is. Okay, you want to make sure you put some thread locker on these threads and then screw it back into the steering rack. Okay, so if your joint is not greased, these don't come with grease fittings, but the Ford one is pre-greased. But if it's dry in there, if the brand you buy is dry, go ahead and shove some grease all in there. Sure. Okay. Okay, next we're going to want to put on the boot, and you get your clamp, put it on there, face it in a way that you can crimp this. What you're going to do is you can take a pliers and you're going to pinch this later. So you're going to slide that boot on there, and you might want to take a little grease and put it on the shaft so it slides on easier. There's a little groove right here. You can see that. The end of this boot is going to go into that groove right there. My finger is. So the end of this end of the boot is going to snap into that groove. You can just put a little grease it a little bit. And just make sure that end of the boot, see it snapped in there already. If you have to, you can turn your steering wheel to pull the tie rod in a little bit so you can snap this other end on to the steering rack. That snapped on there. And you just want to come back with the pliers and pinch this right there. Okay, when you're clamping this boot on the steering rack, if you have trouble with these clamps, like the other side went on fine, I was able to pinch it, but this one I was having trouble with it, so I put a zip tie on there. That's always an option. Okay. Alright, and you want to put your other clamp on. Right there, like that. Next thing you want to do, put your jam nut on there and just thread it all the way up. Just about all the way up the threads. Alright, next, once you got your outer tie rod on down there, just tighten up this jam nut. Okay. Good. Okay, next you want to get your tie rod back into your steering knuckle. Put the nut on there. And get that slack all taken out. Make sure your tie rod end is seated properly in the steering knuckle. Okay, then you're going to want to torque that nut to 60 foot-pounds. That's your torque wrench. There's it clicked. And make sure the hole is lined up in the castle nut so you can put a new cotter pin in there. Okay, a good way to get these cotter pins in here, slide it from the back and make sure you can get to this end here. And what you can do, grab onto it with lock and pliers and then twist it. And then what you can do, when you got it twisted, you can take and wrap the ends around like that. Alright, when you got your cotter pin all bent the way you want it, then you can come back and grease your fittings. Alright guys, so that's it. Got that inner tie rod. We just need to take it to a lineman shop, get it lined up. And if you touched your brake rotor, just take a little brake clean, get the grease off of that, and when you're ready, put your tire on and tighten your lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. That's it. That was a pretty simple, easy job.